Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic This Week in WordPress and SaaS. It's our monthly roundtable show. We've got a great panel, got a special guest. We've got some fantastic stories. I'm going to let the panel introduce them. A couple of the stories are we're going to be discussing WordPress 6.2. We're going to be discussing AI, what Reddit's attitude is to it. We're going to be discussing AI in WordPress. We got some fantastic stories. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. First of all, our special guest, a friend of the show, we got Jonathan Wold back. So, Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Jonathan. Fantastic name. Jonathan Wold. I've been in WordPress about 18 years or so now, and having more fun than ever. How about that?
Oh, there we go. Can't have enough fun, can you, Jonathan? I've got my friend Heather. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi, I am Heather Wilde-Renze. I am the CTO of The Difference Consulting, and I am also known as the Unicorn Whisperer and the author of Birth of a Unicorn, 6 Basic Steps to Success.
I love the title, The Birth of the Unicorn. I just love it, Heather. I've got my friend Chris. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, a learning management system for WordPress, and I have a podcast for course creators and WordPress pros called LMS Cast.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. I listen to it regularly. I've got my regular co-host for the other weekly shows we normally do. Kirk, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. My name is Kurt von Ahnen. I own a small agency called Mañana No Mas. We focus largely on membership and learning websites.
I've got my regular co-host for my other podcast, the Membership Machine Show, Spencer Forum. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, it's Spence from SpencerForman.com, WPLaunchify.com, and my soon-to-be book, Why Jamie Marsland and I Are Arguing Over Full Site Editing, soon to be released on books and DVD.
You're not upsetting him. He's just had 2 operations, heart
Jamie
operations.
Jamie and I are like, are all good spirited. There's nothing between us, but this is going to be like Rocky 2, maybe.
He doesn't know.
He does.
I'm probably going to ask him to come on next month's roundtable show. Actually,
it's going to be like Stanley. How I forgot about full site editing and learned to love classic or something. Yes. Stanley Kubrick sounding in the title.
Well, there we go. Before we go into the main meat and potatoes, I've got a couple of messages from our major sponsors. We'll be back in a few moments, folks.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Lifter LMS, the leading learning management system solution for WordPress. If you or your client are creating any kind of online course, training-based membership website, or any type of e-learning project, Lifter LMS is the most secure, stable, well-supported solution on the market. Go to lifterlms.com and save 20% at checkout with coupon code podcast20. That's podcast20. Enjoy the rest of your show.
Coming back, folks, just want to say that if you want to support what I was going to say, folks, is we got a great list of special offers from the sponsors, plus a curated list of the best WordPress plugins that offer all the solutions for yourself and for your clients. You can get all these goodies by going over to WP-Tonic/deals, WP-Tonic/deals. So straight into it, panel. I start off with WordPress 6.2. I just want to give a quick outline why I chose this, and then get your response, panel. I thought it had some great features. It really seemed to move on the Gutenberg Express train, full site editing, other exciting features. But there were some other comments and views, YouTube videos. One came from the founder of Blog Vault and Mailcare, that there were some concerns that, what you built 6 months ago for a client, or that if they wanted to utilize this new functionality, you literally would have to build the landing page or a number of pages again for the client, and that was viewed as slightly problematic. So, Jonathan, what did you think of 6.2 and some of the response to it?
I think a pretty good indicator for me personally is that when the update comes along, at least these days, I don't even think twice about just clicking the update button on live. So I don't really know all that much about what's in 6.2. When it came along, though, I was like, cool, whatever it is, bring it on.
Just bring it on. All right, then. All right. Spencer, what was your opinion of 6.2?
A couple of things were well appreciated. If we stay out of the full site editing conversation for a moment, just on the actual interface, I really appreciate the direction things like the list view and the block inserter are going. I like the way that some of the graphics are slowly being more visually representative, like getting rid of the cogwheel in favor of the tab thing. So I have this last week tested with stone cold like neophytes, launching a site and showing them a demo of what it's like to take an existing site built with LaunchKit or whatever and opening up a page with the block editor. Immediate win. As soon as I take my truck and drive off the road and try to explain to them, but wait, there's this other thing that you got to go if you want to turn on that goes under the hood and edits the templates and all the rest of the stuff. Blank stare. So I am going to reference this whole thing by saying, can we please draw a line in the sand? The battle lines are there. Everything about where we're finally at with Gutenberg, as Sally predicted years ago, we have finally achieved nirvana. Classic theme, a stack like cadence blocks plus the block editor. Everybody wins. If they keep going down this, let's confuse it with editing with block editor, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to stick for that. I'm going to take everybody in my audience and just say, put on the blinders and go the other direction. Because I love where it's going. I love where the main parts of Gutenberg are going. We don't need the full site editing metaphor.
Yeah, that I for once, well, most of the time, I do agree with you. That
in 17 years.
No, I mostly agree with a lot of things. It's just the last 20% that I am. So, Kurt, what was your thoughts? Because I do agree with Spencer there. You know, it's the full site editing part I'm not too sure about. What's your own feelings?
Overall, with the 6.2 release, I got a little spoiled because I was able to use Lifter's new SkyPilot theme at the same time. And so I had a theme that was built for full site editing and for that environment. And I was really, really thrilled with the experience overall. One of the things that there's two things. So one, when I'm working in 6.2 or the block editor, I don't like the idea that when I'm editing a page, I'm not really seeing what I'm going to get. Like I'm seeing a reasonable representation of what I might see, but you constantly have to look at that preview screen to see what's actually happening. Whereas in Elementor, I have a much better idea of what I'm building as I build it. However, when I'm making long form content, I get that distraction-free edit, that distraction-free writing area, which to me is that's win-win-win all around. If you're someone that makes a lot of content, it's so much better to write in a distraction-free area rather than just a little cube on the left side of your screen.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a good summary of the goods and the bad, really. So, Chris, like I say, I think it's a big improvement. I'm not totally sure about full site editing because I just felt they needed to clean up, concentrate and focus on cleaning up some interface problems, which they are doing, Chris. The other thing is compatibility, you know, like what has been pointed out. Do you think, you know, it doesn't break anything, but if you want to utilize if you had built something 6 months ago or 3 months ago, and then you wanted to utilize some of the key functionality that's in 6.2, you would have had to rebuild the thing to utilize it. Do you see that's the problem, or is that just you just got to accept you're on the train, basically?
I don't think it's a problem. I just think it's part of a product that is kind of rolling out in a live environment. And you know, we're still, even though it's been 4 years or whatever, we're still kind of early. I call it the tale of two interfaces, in the sense, like Kurt mentioned at Lifter LMS, we just launched a full site editing theme called SkyPilot, and I've had to dive deep into the editor and how the new systems works and the templating. I'm actually a big fan of it because I'm not a developer, and now I can do stuff in templates without code. And, you know, when you work with complex content types like courses and lessons, people get opinionated. They want those templates to look and lay out a certain way, maybe bring in some other elements. And now a non-developer can do that, which is awesome. But the tale of two interfaces thing is the challenge. Like, you know, it looks very different. We got the new way to do menus, and there's these classic menus. I was trying to do something in the widgets, and there was like classic widgets and then regular widgets, and I got a little turned around. But like Jonathan said, he's been in WordPress for 18 years. I think I've been in around 16 years. And if you think back to your early days in WordPress, you used to like mess around a lot. And sometimes this is how I knew WordPress was for me, is all of a sudden I would lose like 4 hours, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I'm just trying to build this vision in my mind, and I'm having fun. I'm getting frustrated. I'm like playing around, installing plugins, breaking the site, just doing all this stuff. I think us, especially WordPress people that have been around a long time, it's time to get back in the sandbox and just mess around. Play around, spend an entire sprint, like 2 weeks, if you can, just messing around, or nights and weekends or whatever, and just play. Because the more I get into it, I had to get into it like deeply because I have a product in it. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. But it took me a while to figure out how the toys in the sandbox work. And I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
I make a suggestion about something Chris said that isn't going to happen, but it would solve a lot of the problems. I like your metaphor of tale of two, builders. First of all, the metaphors are not helping anybody. Full site editor would be more appropriately named template builder or something. Okay. Second of all, they could still rescue this whole ship hitting an iceberg problem, as I see it, by making it a separate and distinct thing from WordPress. In other words, you can go and build yourself any theme you want, even as part of the same site, but it's off in the woods somewhere, apart from the main interface. Make a block-based theme that then runs like any other classic theme. Because the starting point of this was somebody, Jonathan or Chris said, it doesn't break anything. It does break stuff. If you turn on a block-based theme over a classic site, it breaks a ton of stuff.
Yeah, it does.
Hard. And those two worlds are not in parallel. So now there's this, we're building a wall, East and West Germany, 1962 kind of thing, like which side are you going to live on? It's destructive to all we've done to get here. Like literally 4 years of finally getting Gutenberg working. And now there's going to be half the community going to be building these things that won't work with the other half. Ridiculous. Not your fault. I'm not blaming Chris.
I had an experience about a year ago where I started playing with the full site editor and pods together. And that took me back, Chris, to what I remember experiencing like a decade prior, of like that magic of like, ooh, I was playing with the loop. I was like taking a concept that I created here, some extra fields. And what I was looking at is how far could I go without writing code? And I was like, I really enjoy this. I found a lot of edges pretty quickly. Things that like, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how to figure this out, like even with my background. But then eventually I got there. And as I'm looking at 6.2 and just the level of polish, I acknowledge the challenges that you're describing, Spence. It's like, yeah, we haven't quite got the execution there. And maybe it's like we're not speaking to the right audience, right? But there's something about the joy. A part of what I'm thinking about is the next generation too. Like what it's going to be like for our kids to come in here and play with this stuff. And yeah, we haven't got it there yet, but I do see these more and more pieces of magic of where we're going with the trajectory.
The problem that I am suggesting is I'm on board with the creativity and let's do new stuff. I mean, I'm talking to my own clients about things that aren't really headless, but using WordPress as an engine and something else on the front end with links. The problem is we're in the car driving and all of a sudden somebody just decided there's 2 steering wheels, 2 sets of brake pedals, 2 gas pedals in the car while you're driving, while we were already remodeling the original set of controls. And I'm like, what is wrong with the people who are making this decision? Do that elsewhere. Make a thing that works independently and people can use it or not use it, but it's not a fork in the road problem, like which wheel actually steers the car. Because that's what I feel is happening now. It's not fun when you're already dealing with trying to teach your clients about why to give up all the external page builders in favor of Gutenberg. And then you have to explain, but there's this other weird layer of Gutenberg that's really not doing the same stuff, and stuff will break and block it. You know, in practice, it's a nightmare.
So, Heather, I'm just going to put this to you, Heather. You know, you just I think you just sampled what is the problem to some extent, because I think it tries to appeal to the tinkerer, to the implementer, to the WordPress freelancer. You know, if you're one of those, what Chris just said probably works for you. But if you're the average business user, you just want something that works, Chris. You don't want a tinkle for free 2 weeks of your life. You just want a bloody solution, Chris. And this has been going on for 4 years, Heather. I know technology changes, but when you're doing a fundamental change, which you've got with 6.2, that suggests to me that, I don't know what it suggests to me, because
this has been the problem all along. Like, and I've been saying this every time, that like they're just so behind, they don't understand the market of like, I don't know who this is for. And I mean, the only thing that I can say about this is I like the purple. Like, I liked how like suddenly everything's purple everywhere. That was what I noticed. Like everything, like suddenly the buttons were slightly different in no matter what page I went to. And like, that's how I knew that 6.2 was there. And I mean, things seemed to be a little bit smoother, but like I also noticed that like half of my plugins broke this week, and it caused a nightmare for my DevOps team.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know, if you're trying, you know, if you're trying to do something that really moves WordPress on, and is disruptive, and you're trying to update something, it's like trying to do engine work on a car, which is on the road, literally. It's a bit difficult. Or do you? But like I say, but we're 4 years on. So what? So I'm trying to find a balanced position, Evan. I know you're very balanced. Is it problematic that you got such a fundamental change 4 years on?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken them a long time to get here, and yeah, I mean, it's going to take a lot of. I mean, it's too little, too late.
Right. Right to you. All right, I'll leave it like that.
Heather's point is well taken, because at the end of the day, the messaging on this is on all of us, those of us who interact with customers. Now, I can't speak for, you know, Lifter, because you're selling a plugin and a service, but for me, having a foot in the world of generic users and software users, I can say that what people want is WordPress as a service, WordPress as a solution. Most users don't want to be tinkering anymore. They would like to be done with the tinkering. So the question of who is this for is, it really should at this point be either for the end users just taking it to go, or for professionals who can control the ecosystem in a logical, standard way. But right now, it's God knows what that hybrid is. It's not for cooks. It's not for consumers. It's not for people eating the baked goods. It's just for anybody who randomly comes across an article today. And, oh, by the way, that's different than something somebody said yesterday. And here we are 17, 18 years into this already. And nobody's taking a stand. I mean, we're never going to change that. We have to stand for ourselves here.
There's one really interesting thing that comes up through all this conversation, and I think about the other shows that I've seen on WP-Tonic, and we talk about the flea market and the 60,000 plugins and all that nonsense. And if there was to be a legacy repository and a blocks repository, only the cream of the crop, or the people that kept up with technology, would be in the new repository. And it's one really good way to filter things out.
Yeah, it could be. On to the next story. Stack Overflow joins Reddit and Twitter in charging AI companies for training data. So, Heather, I've got such mixed feelings about AI. In some ways, I feel what's been said about it over the last couple of months is really just hubrisness at its most. But medium long term, obviously, I think it's going to be big. But I also think, these companies, you've got all the legal side, but Reddit looks like it wants to go public. And they did build these engines, these language engines that did utilize Reddit quite a lot. So are they going to be forced to pay platforms like Twitter, Reddit money to have access to them? Looks like they're going to. And how do you think this is going to affect AI in general? Only small questions, Heather.
Well, okay. So I don't know if you noticed or know this, but Twitter, for example, now wants $100,000 a year for enterprise clients to access its API data.
Elon needs the money, doesn't he?
Well, no, I mean, what used to be free is now like a minimum of $1,500 a month for like a certain number of calls, and you have to be approved to be in that program. But I mean, like, the average cost for it is going to be $100,000 a year, and it goes up from there based on API calls. Reddit right now, people have just been scraping Reddit forever for free, but it's soon, like, they're going to start charging for this as well. The reason for that, I think, is because of the ethical concerns. So it's not, I mean, so I actually kind of agree with them for gating off their APIs because the data on there to train models with is not only is it valuable IP, but I mean, if people are training their data models with like the dregs of the internet, with all of these people that are like having racist and everything conversations, then like our models are going to be terribly biased. Like, we're going to end up with like, I mean, just think about all of the people that are on Reddit. I mean, it's and like
I'd rather not, Heather.
Well, no, but that's exactly it. Like, so all of these large language models are then being trained by like incels and people like that. So like, so all of our AI are going to be more biased than the people that we had before. So yeah, I mean, if we want to avoid the Terminator scenario, like, then we need to gate off these APIs.
Right. So, Jonathan, isn't this just an example of what Google and most of the major tech platforms, aren't they kind of vultures, really? Didn't Google just scrape content off news sites and other people's websites, and the newspapers and the main didn't have the sense to come together and go to Google and say, as a united front? And the reason why they didn't do that is that they despised one another more than they despised Google. And isn't this AI, aren't they just it's not really intelligent, is it? It is something new, but it's not intelligence, it's just a language.
Jonathan, how much have you played with it lately?
Quite a bit, it provides really good content. 101, I call it 101 content. It provides a certain level of content. It provides like WP beginner content. That's what it's good at. But
that's kind of high praise.
Well, I was being sarcastic there. So right.
It's a really interesting time. On just Reddit for a moment, I think Reddit represents, it's a bit of a perfect example of the internet as a whole, because there's a lot of really terrible stuff. There's also a lot of really incredible stuff on Reddit.
Yeah, there is.
Where you have people who will just go to great lengths for like something that they're really passionate about. You'll have incredible conversations, really positive things. And then one click away, you're in this really dark, terrible place, it's kind of a microcosm of just how the internet as a whole works. And in terms of like Google, I mean, here's because I was in that publisher world, right? I remember being in the room with some of those publishers having those types of conversations. And what I think some people just miss is that why did Google work so well? They provide an explicitly superior user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one wants to go to a publisher's site like one at a time, like try to navigate through all these terrible UIs and like it was terrible. Whereas you can go to Google, put what you're looking for, and get that. And what we're finding, I think now with OpenAI and AI as a whole, not just them specifically, is this whole new like interface, this whole new experience where when I'm showing my kids, like it's kind of blowing their minds. And I'm like, yeah, there's something here. Like there's a little bit of a cognitive, like just like how is this working? Like, what is this? Like they can feel there's a magicness to it. And this is what we had with Google originally. There was a magicness to it because if you remember, it was a bunch of links, right? Like you went to sites where you're browsing directories, like you're trying to find stuff.
Well, I think you aged me a bit too much, actually, there, John.
I'm really excited to see. It's going to have a lot of unexpected ramifications. Like we can't predict it. But in general, I'm not on the side of the publishers. Like it's like when I sort of looked at it from that perspective, it's like they're holding on to something. I don't know. I say that, but I also there's a big loss when you lose out on like the local side of things because a lot of small publishers are also just sort of pushed out of business. I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. So, Chris, so basically it's a neural network. The technology's been around for ages, and then GPT puts an interface on it. It's got a big enough data to improve it, and then uses cloud network like Azure. So you've got enough computing to spew something out. And Bob's your uncle. But it's not intelligent. It's just it takes everything, mixes it all up, and spews out something that does the job basically. But it is going to everybody's content and taking it all, isn't it? There is a problem there to some degree, isn't there, Chris? You're muted, Chris. Oh,
Sorry about that. We've been here before with ads. You know, if you're not sure who the product is, you're the product. So, you know, Google reads our emails to then be better able to serve relevant ads. So now companies read our emails or our Stack Overflow posts or Reddit posts or our Twitter conversations to, you know, we use those services for free mostly. Maybe you paid for the check mark, maybe you didn't, but you're entering a contract. It's in the fine print when you sign up for those services. So you do get a lot of value for free, but in exchange, you're making your data available. And to make the case for making your stuff publicly available, if you look at healthcare, I'm actually really excited about all the healthcare data stuck into an AI doctor so that it can predict things well in advance with more accuracy than a human. That's super exciting. But you know what we have to give up? A little bit of privacy over our healthcare data. And so there's different angles, you know, that we definitely need to be careful with privacy, careful with ethics, careful with like.
I'm gonna be. I feel guilty being horrible to you because you've been such a good friend, but I'm gonna be nasty to you again.
Go ahead. It's not me. It's just let's have a meritocracy of ideas here.
The idea of American medical corporations having more knowledge about my data doesn't fill me with great joy, Chris.
I saw a tweet the other day that made me think, which was that in 5 years from now, it might be considered medical malpractice to not have an AI doctor involved in the visit or whatever, because it becomes a human right to have, you know, that level of processing of whatever the healthcare situation is. I mean, think about that.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. You're not sending it to me. Sorry, Chris. So Spencer, I think it's going to be great times for lawyers, isn't it? You know, there's going to be, if you're a trade lawyer, you know, AP, you know, you're going to be really busy the next few years. It's going to be a lot of suing going on, isn't it?
Well, I mean, one can look at this from two ways to solve the problem. The first reason there's a problem, besides it being so powerful and so exponentially growing, is based upon how efficient it is taking this enormous amount of data that exists previously that was open, relatively speaking, and scraping it and delivering it. Because what that's doing is disrupting the business model that all these corporations have relied upon to date. Then once you just set that aside as an understanding, I mean, let's use gasoline as a metaphor, right? For 100 and something years, we've lived off a petrol-based economy, but now there's new technologies that threaten to overtake it. The economy of those entities is not going to go away anytime soon because they're not going to give it up without, you know, prying it from their clenched fist. But when you look at the actual benefits to society, I think the answer to this, if we make it through this transition, is going to be from, as Chris alluded to or someone else alluded to, when you have a different model where the data is not being archived and siloed and sold, but instead the data is reasonably available but yet protected in some way that you could look across 10,000 patients and come up with a pattern of how to cure this disease for everybody, then we can move to the next level. So, like, again, the metaphor of gasoline and electric vehicles. It's hard, and maybe there's lots of arguments from people with big trucks and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's hard to deny that, like, spitting out fumes from gas cars is not, and engines and airplanes is not going to get us where we need to be. So we need to decide where, as a society, as a civilization, we want to prioritize stuff. And I've used AI extensively since it's come out. I've been paying for it. And I found it to be incredible in the sense of just upending the metaphor. It's like the old shipbuilder's parable. The shipbuilder charges the $10,000 for knowing where to tap the hammer, okay? Like, just being able to go right to, I need a solution because I know what to ask of the question, is the secret to success in AI. It's not going to turn you into developer or coder because you don't know the fundamentals. But if you knew the fundamentals and you had to go through all this effort, now you could just tap a hammer, ding, and get there. And even crazy stuff. I have a mechanic who works on one of my cars who's a really clever guy. He's like me. And I just put a question. I said, pretend you're an expert mechanic in this and that and the other. And here's the problem. And it just spit out like a logical checklist of stuff to go over. And I'm saying that kind of stuff took forever of browsing around Google ads to get to before.
Yeah, I see we're coming on. So, Kurt, there was this, the rapper son entrepreneur Drake, you know, somebody used AI to produce a song, and it seemed it was on Twitter, and it, you know, everybody sounded like Drake. And then he's a record company kind of tapped on YouTube and Twitter and say, take that down, you know, that's copyright infringement 101, you know, they had to take it down. So how do you think this is all going to pan out?
I have no idea how it's going to pan out, Jonathan. That's the fun part about being alive right now, is that we really don't know what's going to happen. But I do see, and kind of my fundamental things with AI, I see from two different standpoints. One is, we're all excited about AI because it's new and it's fancy, but people were excited about calculators, adding machines, and PCs when they came out too. And eventually it just becomes a tool. And I keep referring to AI as a great tool. But like any craftsman, you have to become good at using that tool. To me, I look at the inspiration for making original content, and there's a quote in that article that says, unless we all continue contributing knowledge back to a shared public platform, we risk a world in which knowledge is centralized inside the black box of AI models that requires users to pay in order to access their services. And that's kind of encapsulates my whole fear of AI, is that, you know, the reason that I'm going to make a financial investment and time and labor to write an original informative piece is because I'm going to get a byline, or I'm going to get exposed in someone's publication, journal, site, whatever. And then AI comes along, scrapes my content, and gives it out to people for free with no credit. And that takes away the motivation for people to generate new original content. And if AI becomes just a spiral of recycled stuff, it takes away our inspiration, motivation to grow further.
Yeah, I thought that was an excellent point you made there, Kirk. I mean, it's such a mixed bag. It's going to be interesting.
Great tool.
So a related story. WordPress AI generates content blocks. Part 2. This is from humanmade.com. They've been a well-respected WordPress agency for a long time. So, Jonathan, what did you make of this article, and how do you think AI is going to affect the WordPress Gutenberg and blocks in general, Jonathan?
I'm a big fan of Human Made. Been so for a long time. I like what they've been doing with this. I had a chance to spend some time with Noel at WordCamp Asia, and he was showing me some of this stuff coming. And I feel like we haven't. I mean, my own personal take right now is that we're close to some killer applications for this in WordPress. When you just combine open source, like I mean, Chris could probably speak to this a whole lot better than I can. Just if I think about the LMS space right now and the opportunities to be creating stuff that just speeds up the like, to me, the sweet spot is AI plus humans, right? Like you don't just have it do all these things on its own, but to, like, in my own experiments, it's saved me already so much time in terms of starting points. So my overall feeling is that we're getting closer and closer to some killer applications where suddenly it's like, what was this like before? Like, how would you not use these things together to get a site up and running? We don't have that yet. And to Spencer's like opening, when we're talking about 6.2, one of the challenges we have in WordPress generally is that we're trying to build stuff in core like for the masses, and you end up I think you can end up missing the mark for quite a few folks. What it comes down to, though, is who's going to build the applications that bring these pieces together, and those are going to feel like magic. And I'm not seeing that yet, but I feel like we're getting closer and closer to someone saying, yeah, in the LMS space, like this is how we combine this and this, and you can do this with Lifter, and boom. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-through question then. You say magic. Are there any particular areas where you think we're going to be seeing this magic pretty soon?
I think the creation of an entire site. Like WordPress is quite conducive to that. But to be able to say, like, I want a site that does this, and it's just pulling all these pieces that are existing, that are available today, but bringing it together. And people will be able to start with a prompt, and then you have a WordPress site on the other side that has content, that has structured design, all those pieces.
I think you can do that already with Auto GPT or Agent GPT. People are
some of that, yeah.
But Jonathan, how does the licensing, whatever theme is or whatever commercial plugins are? Oh, Heather's left. Maybe she got a bit busy. How does that all fit in to what you just outlined, Jonathan?
I don't know. I think it's a great time to be in the world of GPL. Like, innovation is going to happen a lot faster in this space. There's a big question mark about commercial applications and like, how do you build businesses successfully on this? I think this is what I'm personally excited to see but this is an area where when I'm talking to product founders, it's like, yeah, absolutely, you should be paying attention here and be actively experimenting. I think WordPress is poised to gain a lot from this, and I'm excited to see it.
All right, then, Spencer, what do you reckon?
I think that we're not going to see an end to the various tools that make content available. And I was going to comment earlier, but I'll bring it into this, what Kurt had said about like the value to somebody who's a creator. I think we're just all going to have to accept the fact that the days of somebody being paid for content that is protected are going to go away back to a more traditional patron model, or a model that has to do with relationships. So in the Renaissance period, artists sought out a wealthy benefactor who essentially said, go live your life and make beautiful stuff for me and my friends, right? We moved recently into an economy where there's corporations that essentially aggregate, gather, pay affiliate fees to get stuff and hoard it inside of containers they sell access to. But when we allow this to be created dynamically from AI, It doesn't make sense anymore to think like an artist is going to be paid simply for the making prompts. What will happen is for people to be implementers, intermediaries. Like, I have an eye for art. I have a skill for understanding what this tool can do, and I will be the intermediary on behalf of you, but I need a benefactor. I need something else. But beyond that is something we talked about with Jason Cohn many shows ago. Remember the promise that technology made to us in all the science fiction that we'll one day be free from capitalism as being a requirement, and we'll be able to live lives where we choose as children to do things that are meaningful for ourselves and society, because AI is used on a democratic scale to at least cover people's basics. Now, I'm pie in the sky considering the dystopian future we're in right now with like politics and old boomers ruining the world. But I do think that we can get past this. And if we do, the promise of AI applied with that mindset is we don't have to think like, geez, how can I hustle my entire life just to survive and maybe hope to rent an apartment or send my kids to school? And instead, people can use these tools to make really amazing stuff. And then the whole conversation goes away of, do I have to make a living at it? I just do it because it's good for me, good for society. It feels good. I mean, yes, start the mini violins. But as a capitalist and a realist, that's the reality of what we're dealing with today, is the tug of war between the trillionaire corporations and people and the regular rest of us.
Right. So, Chris, what do you reckon about this human-made? Spencer had a big statement there, but yeah, so what's your reckoning on this?
I think
Chris?
there's an important like rubric to put things through, which is the difference between like a co-pilot versus full disruption or replacement. So I think GitHub Copilot is a great name. I love a good product name when I see it, or feature name or whatever. So if you think about a truck driver, at first there's probably going to be a Copilot, but eventually with the AI driving the car and then or the truck, but then it's going to become fully autonomous fleet. The human doesn't even need to be in the vehicle, but there'll be that transitionary period. When you think about WordPress Copilot, the human is still needed. We need the creative engineer, the visionary. It's going to be an iterative process. We need to AI is not emotional, so you need that human emotion in the copywriting, in the story parts of the website. And yes, you can, AI will be able to create its own movies and lessons, all that. But if to tie it into an area where I give it a lot of thought about with the LMS industry, if the goal is not to be like to write a prompt, be like, okay, I want you to make an LMS website in the kettlebell fitness niche and make a bunch of money, coach a bunch of clients, and then deposit the money in my bank account while I, snorkel in Fiji. Like, that's a full delegation of the entire thing, and AI is not ready for that. But when it comes to a Copilot, what would a Copilot do? It would create the site from a prompt. I think of it sort of like really fancy lorem ipsum. You still got to replace some stuff, maybe redo some images with AI yourself or with real pictures or whatever. You still got to massage the content. When it comes to like auto suggesting as a ghostwriter, like, oh, as you're writing this quiz question, or maybe we'll auto generate a quiz here based on the content, or the big thing that's going to be really cool, and I think will do a lot of good for society, is the personalization that's going to happen. Yeah. So as you get into a learning path, I mean, let's fast forward like super far out. Like, I want to learn about investing from Denzel Washington and the character from the movie Training Day. And you get this completely custom, personalized thing that adapts and makes sure you grasp the key concepts as you keep going. In the same way that we're like dramatically personalizing our images and our text outputs, and eventually movies, entertainment, video games, it'll become so personalized that when we were kids, we had 3 channels approximately or whatever. And now there's like 100, and then YouTube, there's like 1 million channels or whatever. We're still on that exponential curve of personalization. The personalization and the learning opportunity there is super exciting, particularly around kids and adults that fall through the cracks of the education system, to be able to have more personalized education is going to be massive. But AI is going to play a big part of that.
But do you, just to finish off, Chris, do you really see in the next year that fundamentally you're going to see a lot of disruption in the WordPress space based on AI technology?
100%. Or I'll say 99%, because of how fast things are moving. But there can be challenges, like something really bad in society could happen with AI that would have negative repercussions. There could be legal things that pop up around content or whatever, but like Spencer mentioned, it's a good time for the GPL. So all this like open source free stuff that we've been contributing to the free open web, and then AI can, work with that, where we've already done so much work in the past that I think we are going to see a lot of change, because the raw materials are here. People are figuring out how to drive it. Big companies are competing with the large language models and figuring all that stuff out. There's just going to be a period of rapid innovation, a renaissance, and particularly here in WordPress, I do see that happening.
All right, I'm going to go for our break, folks. We've lost Heather. She must have had some technical problems, but we will be back in a few moments with a couple other great articles. Coming back, folks, I just want to point out, if you're looking for a great hosting provider, and let's be frank about it, most of the hosting providers in WordPress aren't that particularly good. If you've got a big learning management project, membership, community website, and you're looking for a great partner, have a look at WP-Tonic. We love you. We've got 15 years experience. We specialize in membership and Buddy Boss websites. Go over and you can find out more what we've got offered to the WordPress community by going over to WP-Tonic/partners, WP-Tonic/partners, and let's have a discussion. So back into it, folks. Well, this is an interesting one. It's a shame that Heather had to leave us. So startup founder Charlie Javice accused of tricking JPMorgan, charged with 175 million fraud. So Spencer, obviously she is innocent until found guilty, so we've got to point that out. But on the other hand, it doesn't look too good for her, in my opinion. What's your own feelings? And if she is found guilty, and that's not guaranteed, how the hell did she manage to pull it off with JPMorgan?
I mean, I would break out a couple points on this. It's unfortunate that Heather isn't here suddenly.
Yes,
It'd be appropriate for her to respond to this. But number one, I can draw in the parallels between Elizabeth Holmes right now, got sentenced hard, versus the other male counterparts in the past who've done these frauds. And she had, whether you argue it was intentional or not, she has young children that she created while she was in the process of this whole litigation. So they didn't seem to use that as extenuating circumstances to throw the book at her. But at the same time, let's not forget, like, JPMorgan has perpetuated fraud on the American public for over a century. And even when caught red-handed, no penalties are allocated out, i.e., let's just look back to the mortgage crisis of 2008 to 10 or whatever. So this is like a prime example for anybody who has not been aware of what's going on around them. The rules do not apply equally to humans versus corporations, and they don't apply equally to genders or to races or colors or anything else. And we are seeing this played out right now. I mean, you can look to politics as well. She was very clever in understanding the mechanics of how a corporation worked. And we see lots of examples of this all over the place. Some of them are remarkable. That's why I think it's always funny, like when we're having password protection forced upon us. The greatest thieves of all time are on YouTube explaining how I created a cocaine cartel And it was like becoming friends with the secretary or the receptionist who had the sticky note on the side of her computer that had the passwords to the safe. I mean, it's just human engineering stuff. But the way the litigation is playing out is tragically, it's a, I don't know what the word is, but it's like playing out exactly as the movie would have been written. Like, it's ironic at best, because if she was a powerful white male, this would not be happening in the same way, as per lots of cases that are in the news these days.
I don't totally agree with that, but I see where you're coming from.
Well, I mean, they're not going to let her off the hook. It's JPMorgan. That all the right people they're friends with and do business with them, so they're going to put her away, and that's that. Like, she took a big chance with who she stole the money from.
Well, they did,
allegedly. Sorry,
allegedly, we got to say that, but allegedly, she did go to a data scientist and ask him, and I think he made $17,000 to make a list with all the data. She disputes that. So we must be. I mean,
the allegations that are really different here is Elizabeth Holmes' case had to do with whether or not the actual technology existed and worked. Here, the main claim is most of the people on the startup's list of users were fake. Okay, you hire a data scientist to make up fake users, allegedly. That doesn't bode well for the fact that you're selling users, right?
It seems a bit iffy to me. But so Chris, the other interesting aspect to this, we've had, Spencer's brought up the Blessed Elizabeth, and I've made it very clear my feelings about the Blessed Elizabeth. But where I disagree with Spencer, the aspect that really interested me, Chris, is that we've had quite a few of these. We've had a major incident in the crypto space. But when you look at these founders and controlling agents, their background, they have similarities. They come from privileged, semi-upper middle class, rich backgrounds. They all seem to have gone to the most MIT or Princeton. They've gone to the most prestige private education, and then the most Ivy League education establishments. Yet they seem totally immoral and crooked to their core, with no moral compass of any sort. Whatever goes, though. What's your response to what I've just outlined, or does that interest you in any shape or form?
I mean, I do have a background in social science and stuff like that, but I don't really have the data and the histories on like all the criminals of this type to shape that kind of stereotype. But I would say that greed, criminal behavior, deviance. One of my favorite college classes is called social deviance. It happens in all levels of society. Everybody on this call has engaged in it in some way, but greed is greed. And there's also a percentage of the population that's psychopathic or whatever. So it's, that exists. Mental illness exists. Greed exists. Selfishness exists. Narcissism exists. And these things play out at all levels of society. And I think, but sometimes they look different depending upon the resources people have and how it plays out. So I love those. I don't know. There's like a video where like these people visit a prison and they're like, take one step forward if you've done X and X, and everybody's actually kind of moving together. But yet this one group is here more in prison or whatever. So it's just, I think it's more just a human nature. And but greed, when money becomes an addiction and an obsession, it takes over people. We just see those stories. It's like an evergreen story as part of the human story.
So Jonathan, was it also that Morgan were in a rush. They wanted to get into the financial app area. You know, we got Apple. Looks like Apple are making a real big push into the personal banking space, and looks like they might be successful. You know, if you've got Apple shares, even though they're some of the most expensive, you still might get a really good, because it looks like they might actually pull off what they're up to. But was that what JPMorgan just were in a big rush because they really wanted to get into that financial app? And the story that Charlie was telling them did seem really attractive, didn't it?
So there was a show I started watching and then I couldn't, it was like too much for me. It's called Inventing Anna. And it's the story of a woman who basically, like, she creates this entire, apparently it's based on a true story, but the core premise of it, because she was trying to raise money, she would work with these influential bankers and like all these people, and so much of it was social engineering based on this premise that people believe what they want to believe. Right. Like it's so someone at JPMorgan, it sounds great, right? Like they probably showed them the live users, right? Like you could show them a couple thousand. That was legitimate. Like it was real. There was like, according to the article, like 300,000 plus real users. You show them that. And I could imagine, and I'm going to guess that maybe it was exactly just greed, right? I can imagine a scenario where you could have, like, if you'd been honest about it, you probably wouldn't have got the valuation that you wanted. Or there could have been a future state where the reality did catch up to what she was projecting, but it didn't get there. People at Morgan believed what they wanted to believe. And then ultimately now they're just moving the blames. Now it's still clearly wrong. If she said that was, we have 4.5 million and only 300,000 were actual humans, that's fraud. Right. But it's interesting because in general, people just don't look very far past what they want to be true.
I think Spencer's made a really good point, because I'm going to have to back off a little bit and say she is innocent. These accusations have been made because Spencer made a really good point. You know, the organisation that's making these accusations isn't morally or in fact a particularly, I wouldn't say credit. I'm struggling for the right word, but for them to they've got their own problems, JPMorgan, to be frank about it. I thought that was a really good point there, Spencer, which I hadn't thought about. They're the last people to, you know, accuse anybody, really. So, Kurt, have you got how did she think she was going to get away with this, really, if she is found guilty of it? You know, because obviously we only go by what publicly has been stated about this case, but if she did go to data scientists and ask them just to formulate, it doesn't look too good, does it, Kurt? Does it?
Well, I think, you know, I'm going off of an article. I'm not an attorney, right? So I'm just reading what I see and did a little bit of other poking around. Corporations are under an unbelievable amount of social stress right now to promote and look for, you know, business principals and investors that are female, especially in the tech area. So she comes to the market and says, I have this cool mail list. And I have these 300,000 people. We have no idea what happened in those meetings. They could have said, hey, this would be really valuable if it was 4 million, but you only have 300,000. You know, we don't know if she was coerced. We have no idea. I mean, before Musk shelled out 44 billion, which is a whole lot more than 175 million, he said, hey, I think there's only 16 million actual Twitter accounts. You know, it's not uncommon at all for people to buy 1,000 followers on TikTok so they can go live.
Yeah, so interrupt, but you made a really good point there, because, you know, we did have this thing with Elon Musk and Twitter, same type of argument, and in the end he said, I don't want to buy it, and he was forced to, because they took him to the Delaware court. So he was kind of semi-forced to, but it's a similar scenario. I think that was a really good point there, Kurt. I didn't take that. So, but it does seem to be a bit little bit further on though. But he had a similar argument with Twitter. Twitter put forward that they had all these users, and then when he delved into it, he said, "No, you haven't." But it must have been. But on the other hand, it must be a bit different because in the end, he was forced to buy it. Kirk, he was forced to buy it. So
Yeah.
But I see where you're coming from. Let's wrap it up with the last story. I'm going to ditch but just finish off with the SpaceX, the Starship rocket blowing up. It was an amazing sight. Kind of spun as well. It was a success. What was your reaction to it, Jonathan? It was an amazing sight, but you would have thought they would have strengthened the base area so it didn't all blow up as you switched all those engines off, because it did cause a bit of engine damage, didn't it?
Dude, like, I'm still blown away every time I get in an airplane and just like how it works and that it works. And I love it. I'm actually quite intrigued by kind of all of it. So at this point, like, there's so much complexity to this stuff that I just give. I recall reading like comments from people who follow this stuff closely and talking about how much of a win this was, even with the blow up. Right. So to me, it just kind of blows my mind in general. I like that we're even trying things like this and that like airplanes work. So kudos to all the folks involved. I'm excited to see the next time.
Yeah, so Spencer, I just presume that Elon wants, because seemingly you can put 100 people into the spaceship. I suppose that's enough room for all his girlfriends, wives, and children that he's had, so they can all go to Mars. I suppose that's the main principles, isn't it?
The success or failure of this particular one was this is the largest object ever attempted to be lifted off the planet with rocket motors. But all the engineers upon whom Elon relies said, hey, listen, we've always used this thing called a flame tunnel, called, the rocket, the exhaust from the rocket goes down into a gargantuan swimming pool of constantly filled cold water and is deflected sideways. And it'd be really neat, since this is bigger than the Saturn V rockets, that we did the same thing. And Elon's, no. A concrete pad that I used to have my barbecue grill on will probably be fine. And so when they looked at what happened, there's perfect evidence that essentially this thing disintegrated the concrete pad that was uncooled and unvectored thrust and shot boulders up, which destroyed half of the engines at takeoff. So the next time when they rebuild it, I think they'll be successful, which is really incredible considering that the thing worked. He just blew up its engines on the takeoff because they didn't bother to put in the...
Well, it's a kind of semi-nuclear explosion. I don't know the precise forces.
Well,
but
what happens is you've got, instead of the giant F1 rockets, like 5 of them, they have lots of smaller, powerful ones. I know the name, they've been reusing them. But if a certain number of them go out, the rocket is doing this, and it self-destructs, or they hit the self-destruct,
So, Chris, what did you think of it? It was amazing in a way, but I think this has been the topic of this show, really, Chris. It's a lot of grey in these discussions, isn't it? For obvious reasons. So it was a success in one way, but if what Spencer's outlined, it kind of meets into the kind of culture of SpaceX, doesn't it? Oh, we're not going to build these channels. We're just going to have a concrete, and it blows up half the engines. It's all kind of linked, isn't it, Chris? Culture and outcome, really, isn't it?
Well, I think if it takes 4+ years to really get Gutenberg built in WordPress, I think we can cut Elon a little slack on getting to Mars. And part of trying something new is failure. This is just very cinematic.
Oh, you've been unfair there. Building a block editor in WordPress is much more complicated than going to Mars. Come off it.
I'm not a rocket scientist.
Especially,
so I literally can't
dealing with the WordPress community, most of them need to be expelled to Reddit. They say that they're trolls at their core is the understatement of the century. So there's a certain part of the WordPress community, I think they just spend all their time on Twitter. You need to actually do some work people, not spend all your days on Twitter, mate. So, Kirk, what did you reckon about this explosion?
I'm supposed to follow Mr. Badgett and his quick wit with that one, right? I look at the funding and I look at, hey, what did NASA do? It wasn't that long ago that, I was working at wall-to-wall sound and video and we were all watching the Challenger take off and it blow up on takeoff, things happen. And, he's made the investment and his budget substantially less than what our taxpayers spent with NASA. And so it's like, hey, let's see how far he can go. But he does take these like large leaps and then he's like happy about the failure, right? Hey, we learned from it. And it's like,
well, it was a day away from Twitter, so he was just probably happy to get away from that Twitter crowd. So that's my opinion. Well, panel, shame we lost Heather, but I think she had technical problems. I think it's been a great discussion. Listeners and viewers, support the show. Go to the WP-Tonic YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and also tell people about the podcast in general. Our figures are going up. You seem to like the content. It's great. And my last statement, folks, is it's really easy to become a hater. What you got to try is become a lover. That is the story, especially for the WordPress community. Be more loving, not such haters. We will be back next week with our normal interview show, and next month, the last Thursday, with our roundtable show. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.